It's almost 6 minutes past 1. Dominic Laurie standing in for Sheila again today between 12 and 2. The main story this lunchtime, consumer groups say changes designed to simplify energy tariffs, which come into force today, are welcome but don't go far enough. The changes mean that energy companies are now supposed to offer just 4 basic tariffs for gas and 4 for electricity. The idea is that consumers should, in theory, find it easier to select the best tariff for their needs. Here are the thoughts of Martin Lewis.
What we've effectively done is reduce the differential between the cheapest tariff and the most expensive. So those people who've sat languishing on and never changed, which includes many elderly people, will start to see standard tariffs relatively, not absolutely because prices as a whole are going up, relatively dropping. Those people who were churners or energy tarts, switching regularly, doing what the government sort of has always wanted us to do, embracing the competition, will see their prices going up relatively. So we've narrowed the gap, and I have to say this is a good day for fairness and simplicity, but I think it's a bad day for choice.
Well, here's Ian Marley from the regulator Ofgem. He told 5 Live why the changes were needed.
This is a competitive market, and to be honest, our research shows that the market isn't completely broken. We don't need to start again, but the suppliers did have the option of putting out a whole range of tariffs. Now, some of those are in response to consumer demand. They're the good ones. They're the ones we want to encourage. But some of them, frankly, were just out there and just causing too much confusion in the market. So we're banning complex tariffs. We're limiting the number of tariffs to consumers, and this is part of our package of reforms. We introduced reforms back in August to make the market fairer, in October to make sure that fixed meant fixed. When you entered a fixed price, that you weren't going to inadvertently see your prices rise. We've got reforms coming in March to make the market much clearer for consumers.
Now, we'll talk to a representative from the energy companies in a second, but first, Tom Greatrix is the Shadow Energy Minister. And Tom, I guess you welcome simplification.
Oh, I do, although I think there's also an issue around comparability, because simplifying and reducing the number of tariffs may mean there are less tariffs for people to try to choose between, but because of the way in which the tariffs are arrived at and the structure of the way it's presented on bills currently, it's very hard to compare what a unit is between one supplier and another. So we would go further in the sense of wanting to ensure that there's a standing charge which covers the parts of your bill for ensuring that the electricity, for want of a better term, gets to you, and then for the amount that you're using, that they are comparable between different suppliers, because that isn't always the case now, which makes it confusing for people when they're trying to work out whether they're getting a good deal or a bad deal.
So you're saying it's very hard to go onto the website of one company and then go to the website of another company and compare apples with apples. You said that's pretty difficult.
Because of the way that both the standing charges and the way in which the units are described by different companies and different suppliers, they're not. Okay. It's not done in a uniform way, and we think that would help to bring some of that clarity and transparency, which is the reason why there's been such a low level of switching and decreasing level of switching, because people aren't confident that they actually can tell whether they're going to get a better deal or not, and some people have very bad experiences after switching.
Now, Labour has accused the energy companies today of overpaying for their energy to an amount of £50 per year on every household bill. Just tell us how you've come to this calculation.
Yeah, this is about looking at the wholesale price that the big suppliers, who supply 98% of the domestic market, pay for their generation over 3 years, compared to a year-ahead price paid by First Utility, who are one of the smaller of the other suppliers. And what that demonstrates is that for the equivalent of £50 a year, they've been overpaying. Now, this
why on earth would they do that? Why would they deliberately overpay for their key raw ingredient?
Because large suppliers are also generators. So, and this comes to the root of the issues which we've been talking about for near enough 2 years now, around the need for there to be real transparency in the way this market works. Because if you generate the power and then you're able to sell it to yourself and then sell it on to consumers, you can claim a relatively low level of profit in your retail business, but be making significant profits in your generation business. And this just adds to the case that we've been making now for a number of months of the need for real clarity and transparency. We need to ensure that there's a ring fencing between the generation and supply parts of the businesses, and we need to ensure that all all the power is traded openly on an open exchange, so everybody can understand and the regulator can discover exactly what prices people are paying. So then there's, again, bringing fairness and transparency to a market which has been far too complicated for far too long.
Now, you're almost accusing energy companies of breaking the law, i.e. deliberately overpaying for something and paying themselves more money than the market rate. You understand the seriousness of what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that energy companies are, if they're generators as well as suppliers, there is nothing to stop them supplying themselves. And indeed, they have said, and they said in select committee evidence that they do at various points supply to themselves and have energy sold between different parts of the same businesses, and in what's called bilateral trading between the two bits, which is not done over an open exchange. That makes it harder for other smaller companies and others to supply companies to take part of that market. That's why we think there needs to be real transparency around this and ensuring that not only is it something which at least one of the energy companies has now said they'll do, which is all open trading, but that is mandatory, so that all has to be done openly over an exchange. So then that enables the competition that you were just talking about in your package before to actually properly be able to work in the interest of the consumers, and I would say also in the interest of the companies, because it's not good for the companies to be in the position they're in, where people don't trust them, and the best way of ensuring that there's trust is complete transparency in the way the market works for the future.
Okay, Tom Gretrick, Shadow Energy Minister, stay with us. Let's talk to Angela Knight, Chief Executive of Energy UK, which represents more than 80 energy generators and suppliers. Angela, can we respond to what we were talking about just now with Tom there, that an accusation that energy companies are overpaying for their most important raw material? Respond to that.
Yes, well, I don't agree that that's correct at all. I mean, I do appreciate where Tom has got some of those wholesale prices that he's been using from, but the way that they're published by the regulator is they include quite a lot of other costs in there as well. And of course, you know, the generation market is, there's many more independent generators than one might think. And a lot of our electricity is, of course, generated by those independent members. But you see, where I would agree with Tom is that the market is quite complicated and that it would benefit from a lot more transparency. And that's one of the things that the energy companies themselves of all sizes and all ownerships have said for some time. And right now we're talking with, for example, those trading platforms where energy or electricity is traded to try and make those come to agreement with them so those prices are more public. We've done quite a lot of work as well on what does a good trading mechanism look like. Yes, we do agree that there's a lot more work that needs to be done in this area, a lot more transparency, but I do reject the idea that somehow that with some of the power there's a kind of, well, almost a stitch-up. That isn't the case at all. It's an open trading. Trading does take place. We believe, though, that there's a greater degree of clarity and transparency we can bring into this area.
Well, Angela Knight, you could say that a good mechanism for buying energy might have been introduced easily 20 years ago or 15 years ago, which is simple, transparent, exchange-based buying that everyone can see, as opposed to now, you say it's confusing and it's complicated. Well, there's a reason for that, because we can't see what goes on.
Well, I wasn't there sort of 15 or 20 years ago, if I may say.
Yeah, but the energy companies were, Angela.
I've been engaged with this industry since September 2012. There are some very real questions that need to be answered on the retail side, and I do want to come to the retail side in a moment, and on the generation side. And the industry is absolutely up there answering them.
They've profited from a lack of transparency, Angela. That's the accusation.
Yeah, I know that's the accusation, and I don't agree with it at all. The transparency issue is important, and so making things more transparent, that knocks down those accusations.
Well, why if energy companies don't make money out of opaqueness and a lack of transparency, then why weren't they more transparent about the cost of wholesale energy 15 or 20 years ago?
Well, as I say, I can't answer to 15 or 20 years ago. You'll have to ask them that.
You can't disagree and rebut my arguments by saying you weren't there.
I simply was not there. And I doubt that many of the customers and consumers that are listening to this program are particularly concerned about what happened 15 or 20 years ago when a regulator said this or a government said that or an opposition said the other. I think people are far more concerned what is happening today. They want to know what it is that they can expect in terms of their gas and their electricity.
Why not make the commitment to do it this year then, Angela?
And the prices, and I am very, very keen to ensure that as far as all the customers of the energy companies are concerned, they do get transparency, they do get choice, they do get a selection of tariffs which they can understand and they can compare. Now, I think that there is a question about whether in this new regime of poor tariffs for electricity and poor tariffs for gas, as to whether it is easy to compare or not. Now, I've had a look through a number of the websites this morning, and I think that it is quite significantly easier to compare. But by the time we get to the end of this first quarter, by the time we get to the end of March, there is something called a tariff comparison rate, as that is part of this whole series of changes that is rolling through and is rolling out.
But I'm just going to put to you...
comparison rate will actually help people to compare a lot more easily.
What I'm going to do, Angela, I'm just going to put to you what Tom Greatrix was saying, which was that he welcomed a lot of the measures coming in today, but he said it was a shame that there wasn't just the same stand-in charge mechanism used by every energy supplier. Why isn't there a sort of an industry-agreed mechanism there?
Well, we're actually doing what the regulator has required, and the regulator...
Why don't you go further?
Well, the regulator has changed the rules and has put some requirements about what the industry needs to do. So the industry has done that. And this question about can you easily compare and choices about standing charges is one which was heavily discussed by the regulator with all sorts of different groups. And they came to the conclusion, which is the one that we're having to do. They changed the license conditions accordingly. But there is this point about can it be made easier to compare when you've got different standing charges, and they're there for different reasons, of course. And the answer is a tariff comparison rate will do that. And that, I think, will, as I say, not make, well, it's already a lot easier, but it will make it even more simpler and pick up that question that's been asked.
All right, Angela Knight, thank you very much. Angela Knight, Chief Executive of Energy UK. Tom Greatrix, who we spoke to before, the Shadow Energy Minister, was listening to that. Tom Greatrix, just respond to the points I was putting to Angela Knight there.
Well, I think what your listeners will have heard is that actually Angela doesn't have any defence for the lack of transparency there currently is. And, I was on my way to football yesterday reading the paper on the train, and there's full-page adverts from at least one of the energy companies talking about their New Year's resolution, about how they're going to be fairer and clearer and more transparent. Well, those companies have got an opportunity to properly engage with this so that we do have real transparency. That's what we're proposing in terms of reforms. If they get behind that, then we can force the government and regulator to do it, because I think that's in their interest as companies, as well as being, importantly, in the interest of consumers, that people can understand exactly why they're paying what they're paying. They can't at the moment. That's at the root of the reason why people don't trust their energy suppliers.
Talking of football, you're a big Fulham fan.
I am, yeah.
If Berbatov went to Arsenal?
Well, it would just prove that not all Bulgarian immigrants are there to take other people's jobs. I think he's a player who is I've been delighted to see playing for Fulham over the past time. And I have to say that sometimes people look at him and think, oh, he's a bit of a lazy player who doesn't really get involved. But
people like Piers Morgan.
People like Piers Morgan. But if you watch him carefully, you will see that actually he works very, very hard, and his positioning is superb. The amount of balls that he plays to other players is brilliant. His language style sometimes disguises actually the amount of work he does do. I think he's an excellent player. I'd be sorry to see him go if he does go.
In a word, you're going to stay up?
I hope so.
Good stuff. All right, Tom Greatrix MP, Shadow Energy Minister, talking about energy primarily, but also giving us a little bit of an insight into Fulham football fandom as well. It is, sorry, a bit late, it's 19